Hello, friends. I am Ashok Kumar. Today I am going to discuss the first chapter of the book Footprints Without Feet, which is supplementary reader for class 10th. The name of the chapter is A Triumph of Surgery. This story is about blind love which we possess for one whom we love the most. Mrs. Pumphrey had no idea that her blind and extreme love for her dog Tricky took him to trouble. So, this particular story is written by James Harriet. You have to read the whole text at home because this book is supplementary reader book which is meant for self reading. I am making this video as part 1 as it is not possible for me to discuss the whole chapter in one session only. So let's start with the introduction. This story is about Tricky, a dog who is the pet of a rich lady named Mrs. Pampery. She loves her dog very much and is unable to refuse him anything he wants. Tricky is fond of eating cream, cakes, and chocolates. So one day, when Mrs. Pumphrey is out with Tricky for a walk, the narrator sees them and stops to talk. While talking to Mrs. Pumphrey, he realizes that she has been overfeeding Tricky and also had been giving him things that he shouldn't eat, due to which Tricky had started looking like a bloated sausage. Bloated means swollen. Sausage means piece of meat. Soon Tricky got unwell, and Mrs. Pumphrey has to call Mr. Harriet, who is a narrator in this story, for his help. She does not want to send him away, but the only way suggested by Mr. Harriet, a veterinary surgeon, is to get him hospitalized for 15 days. Then the story unfolds into how he gets well. So, this was the introduction of the story. Now, let's see the title: A Triumph of Surgery. Triumph means victory, and surgery means a place where a doctor or physician works, and sometimes he get operation, that is called surgery. But here surgery means the place of um, working of doctors, where he give treatments to the patients. So here its meaning is that victory of doctor's treatment given to Tricky, a small dog. Now let's see, there is something written about this story. Tricky, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. He falls seriously ill, and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? These things we will have to find while reading this text. Now, certain questions are there which you have to also uh, go through while you're reading. So these questions are: why is Mrs. Pumphrey worried about Tricky? What does she do to help him? Is she wise in this? Who does I refer to in this story? I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car. Pulled up means stopped. When I saw him in the street with his mistress, I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat, very fat, like a bloated sausage. Bloated means swollen. Sausage means a piece of meat with a leg at each corner. His eyes bloodshot, reddish with blood, and Ryumi stared straight ahead and his tongue lolled from his jaws. So, Ryumi is another word. It is a watery discharge from nose and eyes, especially. Okay, now we will discuss what the narrator has told us in this part of the text. I here is the narrator. In the first line I is used. So I here is the narrator. And narrator is Mr. Harriet, who is a veterinary surgeon. He tells that he was very much worried about the dog, Tricky. He was shocked his appearance. He had become a um, huge dog, like bloated piece of meat. His eyes were red with blood, and a watery discharge of mucous membrane from nose and eyes was visible. So it was uh, discussed in this part of the text. Now let's see the difficult words meaning of this part. But before that, see a picture will make you very clear that how fat was Tricky. This is a picture of the same kind of dog, and the picture will be very much clear to you. Now see difficult words meaning. Bloated means swollen with fluid or gas. Sausage means a piece of meat, bloodshot, inflamed with blood. Ryumi, a watery discharge from mucous membrane, especially of the nose and eyes. Lolled means sit, lie, or stand in a lazy, relaxed way. Now, let's see what is there in the next part of the text. Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain he was so listless. Listless means without motion. Mr. Harriet, he seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition, so I have been giving him some little extras between meals to build him up. Some malt and cod liver oil and a ball of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. And uh, did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak I had to relent. He does love cream, cakes, and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night, and I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hawkin, the gardener, has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing. So, lumbago means suffering from back pain. Now, let's see what is there in this part of the text. In this part of the text, we read that Mrs. Pumphrey explained the condition of Tricky and told about the things she had supplied to the dog, like malt. Malt means mixed grain, and you can say germinated grain. So, cod liver oil, Horlicks, etc. she was supplying to the dog. On inquiring about the sweet things, Mrs. Pumphrey told that she could not stop Tricky from eating chocolates and cream cakes. So Harriet understood the problem that dog's only fault was greed. Then he asked about the exercise of the dog, and he got reply that because of Hawking the gardener's back pain, it was not taking place. So this was there in this part of the text. Now let's see what is there in the next part. But before that, these are some of the meanings. Listless, lacking energy and enthusiasm, barley or other grain that has been steeped, germinated, and dried. Relent means abandon. Lumbago, muscular pain in the lower part of the back. Now see in this part of the text, what is there? I try to sound severe. Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he's going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will. Mr. Harriet, I am sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off head down along the road as if determined to put the new design into practice immediately. So there are two words which I think are difficult for you. First one is uh, resign. This is a set of exercise and diet plan. Rung means to press. So these two words I think are difficult for you. Now let's see what is there in this part of the text. In this part of the text, Mr. Harriet gave Mrs. Pumphrey an advice that she had to cut down the diet of the dog and to give him more exercise. Mrs. Pumphrey promised to follow the advice of Mr. Harriet without any delay. So this was there. Now see the difficult words meaning again. Run, to press and squeeze something. Resign, prescribed course of exercise in diet. Now let's see what is there in this part of the text. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He had a whole wardrobe means almirah, of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within a few days. Mr. Pumphrey was distraught. Distraught means very much worried. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. Bouts means um, something doing in a quick or hurry manner. Now, he spent all his time lying on a rug, panting means breathing noisily, didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight. Fortnight means 15 days time, to be kept under observation. The poor lady almost swooned. Swooned means uh, feeling pain of separation. She was sure he would pine. Again, pine has the same meaning, feeling pain on somebody's separation. And if he did not see her every day, but I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and he did so. So now, in this part of the text, we read that the narrator observed the process of exercise given to dog. He was aware of the fact that the dog was becoming lazy and fatty day by day. And one day he got an expected call from Mrs. Pomfrey. She told the narrator that Tricky had stopped eating and was vomiting. He was too feeble to walk on. Mr. Harriet had made his plan in advance, and he suggested Mrs. Pomfrey that there is only one way to save the dog is to hospitalize Tricky for 15 days. So now let's see what is there in the next slide. Difficult words meaning tottering means move in a feeble or unsteady way. Tweed, it's rough swollen fabric. Trooping means getting down. Harness, a set of straps and fitting by which a horse or other animal is fastened to a cart or plow. Distraught means extremely worried. Bouts, a short period of intense activity. Swooned, faint, especially from extreme emotions. Pine, to be very unhappy in absence of someone. So these were difficult words meaning in that part of the text. Now let's see what is there in the next part of the text. Followed by Mrs. Pomfrey's wailings, I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. The entire staff was roused and the maids rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, and rubber things, breakfast bowl, lunch bowls, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pomfrey, with despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head and Tricky made a brave effort to wag, means to move his tail. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. So in this part of the text, we read that Mr. Harriet put the dog in his car, and the entire staff of Mrs. Pomfrey uh, came behind him with the things of Tricky, like lunch balls, supper ball. These are given there. You can read from there. There was not much space in the car, so Mr. Harriet started to drive away his car. And Mrs. Pomfrey threw some of little coats through the window. At the bay, Mr. Harriet looked at the dog. He patted his head, and the dog made a brave effort to move his tail. And in this way, Mr. Harriet understood that Tricky himself will not do anything, but he had thought about a cure for him. So this was in this text. Now let's see difficult words meaning. Despairing means showing the loss of all hope. Glance means take a brief look. Pathetic, arousing pity through sadness. Bag means move or cause to move rapidly to and fro manner. So these were difficult words meaning. Now today's homework. So you have to write the difficult words along with their meanings in notebooks and summarize the discussed part of the chapter, means which part we have discussed. It is to be summarized by you in notebooks. That's all for today. Thank you. Have a nice day.